This is Chapter 3 of Remembering Survival Inside a Nazi Slave Labor Camp by Christopher R. Browning. Chapter 3, narrated by Carter Banks. Chapter 3, The Early Months of German Occupation. The Jews of Wiersbenich remember the early months of German occupation, chiefly for the dizzying array of restrictions and humiliations showered upon them. As one survivor put it, every 5 minutes there was a new law. In the words of another, every day brought a new edict leading to complete chaos. The first reality that faced every family with children was that young Jews could not return to their schools when they reopened. In nearby Bolzentine, Jewish children were not allowed to attend the reopened schools for a few days before they were banned in early October 1939. But in Wiersbenich, the ban took place immediately. Thus, a basic pattern of family life, fundamental to Jewish culture, was disrupted from the beginning. Other restrictions quickly followed. The Germans imposed a curfew that barred Jews from going out in the evening after 6 p.m. in Wiersbenich and after 7 p.m. in Bolzentine. Jews were forbidden to possess radios. They were barred from the use of public transportation, forced to take off their hats when encountering a German in uniform, and compelled to walk in the street rather than on the sidewalk. Germans could search and pillage their homes and businesses with total impunity. A young Rosalie Laux remembered a group of elegant German officers entering the family home and looking around for things. When one found something he liked, he politely told her mother, "This is beautiful, please wrap it for me." The German share of Poland was divided between the Western incorporated territories, annexed to the Third Reich, and the central region that became a German colony known as the General Government. The latter, in turn, was divided into 4 districts: Warsaw, Krakow, Lublin, and Radom. Wiersbenich, in the district of Radom, had a total population of somewhat over 3 million people, of whom 375,000 were Jews. In the 4 districts of the General Government, Jews were required to wear an armband with a Star of David on it. Perhaps because the provincial and mostly unassimilated Jews of Wiersbenich were already usually identifiable by virtue of their clothing, hairstyle, beard, language, and gestures, most of those who mentioned the armband requirement did so in quite a matter-of-fact manner. Indeed, Sala Glatt was quite explicit that wearing the armband was not the worst thing. Only one survivor spoke emotionally of this particular German measure as the most humiliating of all degrees, one that branded Jews with a deep sense of shame, and another deemed it not a pleasant thing to be singled out as a Jew in this way. More prominent in the memories of survivors was the burning of the Wiersbenich synagogue in late September 1939, close to Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, the Germans also seized a clandestine minyan of Jews dressed in their religious finery. They forced them to unload coal from a train and then forced them to smear themselves with dirt and mud in order to abase themselves even more. German police also descended upon Rabbi Ben Zion Rabinowitzi and demanded that he sign a declaration that the Jews had set the synagogue on fire, but he refused. Police soon returned looking for the rabbi, declaring that they had orders to shoot him, but the family successfully begged for his life. Subsequently, his daughter struggled to explain the unusual stay of execution. "I I had the impression that these people were not yet accustomed to killing. Survivors' most vivid and searing memories of the early days of German occupation related less to German legal measures, which soon exceeded anyone's capacity to remember and enumerate, than the shock of German brutality that accompanied everyday encounters and the overwhelming sense of humiliation, vulnerability, and the danger that such casual brutality inflicted. Many such incidents were tied to radom, roundups of forced labor that the Germans carried out that fall as men from their mid-teens to 60 years old were seized on the streets or taken from their homes to perform menial physical labor, such as working on roads, sweeping streets, shoveling snow, or carrying wood or water. The men were frequently beaten and returned home as cripples, forced to carry buckets of water. Henia Berman's uncle died of a heart attack. Rosa Herling's father was forced to remove horse dung from the street while dressed in his prayer shawl. Particularly shocking for children was the sight of their parents being physically abused. When 3 policemen arrived at the apartment of Sesha Bromberger, the youngest of them slapped her mother, an experience that left Sesha with nightmares. The Lax family, one of the most prominent Jewish families in Wiersbenich, was walking on the sidewalk and failed to step off into the streets quickly enough when encountering a German. The German pushed Isak into the gutter and kicked him again and again until his glasses were broken and his clothes ruined. This experience came as a shock not only to Isaac, a man of German education and culture, who had many pre-war business contacts with Germans without an inkling of such potential for violence, but also to his family. This was the first time I understood what the war was all about, his daughter Rosalie recalled. One subject so often captured by German photographers of the Polish campaign and its aftermath was the cutting of beards of Jewish men and a particular ritual of degradation aimed at Jewish religious identity and manhood, demonstrating both the contempt for and the weakness of the victim. Among Wiersbenich survivors, this ritual was also one of the most frequently cited memories, as the sight of Jewish beards seemed to offer a particularly irresistible opportunity for abuse on the part of Germans stationed there. The tormentors of Mikulek Barnek's grandfather were especially creative, cutting off only half of his beard. Hurting from the disgrace, but unwilling to cut the other half, he would only go out wearing a scarf to cover his face. The cumulative impact of these radom roundups for menial and humiliating forced labor, physical beatings, plundering, and rituals of degradation, such as beard cutting, paralyzed Jewish life in Wiersbenich in the early months of German occupation. Jews feared going into the streets, and men in particular hid as best they could. There could be no question of life returning to normal for Jews, but obtaining at least some measure of order, predictability, and mitigation was necessary just to cope. The German-imposed Jewish Council, or Judenrat, acted as an intermediary between the German occupiers and the Jews. It had the unenviable and difficult task of trying to find ways of satisfying the former while protecting the latter, so that some semblance of life could return to the Jewish community. Well, that was chapter 3.